Good afternoon, or good evening, or good morning, wherever you're coming from. We will be starting the webinar at 4 o'clock UK time, so we're just 2 minutes away from that, and look forward to having a conversation. Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening or good morning, wherever you're coming from. My name is Ian McKechnie. It's my pleasure to be hosting our live webinar today on Servitization meets marketing. My role at the Advanced Services Group, I look after Director of Strategic Programs, and we have the webinar been recorded for two reasons. One, for those that have access now can look back and pick up on some of the key points that we're getting from our speakers. And secondly, for those that are not able to join us, we will have a copy of the recording sent out so that they can pick up on all the key points as well. So just a quick introduction to the agenda this afternoon. I'm going to start off by introducing Michael Bloomberg. Michael is President and CEO of Bloomberg Advisory Group from the US. And he's going to talk about service marketing, the most important step of your servitization journey. So everything we're doing this afternoon is servitization related, but looking at it from perhaps a marketing perspective and looking at marketing through a servitization lens. I'm delighted then to introduce Thomas Fraser-Bacon from Allseed Technologies. Thomas is the marketing director there. And we've worked with Thomas for a number of years, and he's going to give you just a bit of insight about the use of servitization and how he found that a very invaluable promotional tool for the business. I'm then delighted to have with us today Dr. Kawal Kapoor. Kawal is a colleague at the Advanced Services Group, but she's carried out some significant research on value networks, and we are going to share a bit more about that research today and why it supports servitization and marketing and vice versa. And then we'll have a speaker panel where we will deal with any open Q&A questions that come to us. And if you would like to use the Q&A function on your screen, we will deal with these questions in turn. And then finally, just a quick call to action at the end to share some details about what we do and what we can offer as support. So very quickly, the Advanced Services Group, we are a group of about 30 individuals at the business school at Aston University in Birmingham, UK. We've been operating for almost 10 years now, and we focus on two things: servitization and advanced services. And we're very niche at what we do. We drive the research agenda around servitization at a global level through our Spring Servitization Conference. We are fortunate to have the #1 academic in the world, Professor Tim Baines. He is #1 in the term servitization and advanced services. And it's Tim's reputation that built our group, and we use that research pedigree to drive all our engagement with industry. An example of that would come in the form of Servitization Live, which we are running as an in-person activity in Birmingham this year, in the 4th to the 6th of October. It will also be live streamed online for those that are not able to travel to the UK or to Birmingham. But it's an opportunity for you to see some of the industries that we work with. They will be bringing along exhibitions and showing others that are perhaps new to servitization how they can get involved, the benefits of doing so, and the commercial and economic value that came from actually transforming their particular businesses. So with that said, I'm going to hand over now to Michael Bloomberg. We've known Michael for a number of years. It's a pleasure to have him here today from the US. And he's got some really interesting material to share with you regarding the marketing stack. And I'll hand over to you, Michael, to take the floor. Thank you.
Hey, Ian, thank you for inviting me to present today. And good evening, good morning, good afternoon to all our attendees. Want to bring up the slide deck here. I'm not seeing the slides here.
Just bear with it, Michael.
Okay.
Christina will check for us. Thank you.
You should be able to move it now.
Okay. Here we go. Okay, so this topic is very near and dear to my heart. Let me give you a little bit of background story on myself, a little bit of an origin story, if you will. I started my career in the firm that I'm currently running today, Bloomberg Advisory Group. At the time, it was called DF Bloomberg Associates. And DF was my late father, Donald. And he did a lot of pioneering work in helping companies move from operating service as a cost center to a strategic profit center. And I did quite a bit of work in that company as part of that, worked with clients, did a lot of market research and strategic planning around that topic. And of course, as you move from a cost center to a profit center, you're offering more and more services. So in a way, it's a little bit of a servitization journey that a company goes on when they move from a cost center to a profit center. And one of the things that I found early in my career is we would do what I thought was really great strategic planning studies and good market research. And our studies and our research would validate that there's a demand for more services, that the companies we're consulting to should offer more services, deliver the services, maybe even improve their infrastructure so they could deliver these services. And what would often happen is we as a consulting firm would face reluctance from the management team or stakeholders in the management team about broadening the service portfolio and marketing services. They'd often say, well, there's challenges today that our services aren't good. And we'd say, how do you know that? Well, customers are complaining about it. So, but we didn't see that in the research. It was like anecdotal. So anyway, to make a long story short, I began my own journey of trying to find out how to rationalize and how to implement these new services, how to go to market, because that was a reluctance, is that they didn't really know how to market and sell these services. They could see in the data that there was a need for them, but the clients didn't know how to take them to market, how to offer them, how to sell them, and how to close the sale. So that began my journey. So before we get any further, I want to share with you a quote that's really been very meaningful to me, and it's kind of helped me think about the roadmap for service marketing and for servitization in general. And that's a quote from Peter Drucker, who I think is probably the greatest management guru of our time, particularly in the 20th century. And that quote is that business only has two functions, marketing and innovation. So when I think about servitization, most of what I see today is around the innovation, how to use IoT to deliver as a service offerings. how to use other tools and technologies to deliver outcome-based services. But what we really need to do more of is the marketing, because that's just the delivery and the packaging is just part of it. We also have to be effective in marketing. So that's what I hope to share with you today, ways to become effective in marketing services. And part of my discussion will be on what you should do, but also on what you shouldn't do. So when Ian and I discussed what this webinar should focus on, and what I should focus on in particular, we talked about 3 servitization marketing challenges that companies might experience. And one of these is that clients, service providers, they're dealing with internal perception within their teams that service isn't good enough. That's the reluctance I was mentioning before, that a stakeholder says, well, how can we think about offering more services and selling more services and changing our pricing model when our clients, our customers are not that happy with what we're doing today, that they want better. So I want to address that in this webinar. The second challenge is dealing with the transition from order taking through to selling service solutions. And that has to happen. And what happens is, as you move around the servitization journey, your business model changes, and so does your marketing model change. And unfortunately, in a lot of companies today, when it comes to services, we think about services as attachments, as selling a service contract at the point of product sale. And in a way, that's a little bit like order taking. So we got to move beyond that. And the third one is empowering teams to sell outcome-based services, outcome-based service contracts, which is in a way an extension of the second point we mentioned here. So let's deal with the first topic that I brought up, which is dealing with internal perceptions. And these internal perceptions that we see are really biases. Most of them are biases that the management team or the executive team or some stakeholder has about marketing the services. So the first of these biases is a service bias. And that's what I mentioned before, is that maybe our service isn't good enough. And it's interesting that we just did a study on field service industry sentiment. And about 35% of the customers we surveyed, the companies we surveyed, indicated that services role is to support the products once they're sold, nothing more. And so service comes into play when the product isn't working. And when the product isn't working, customers at that point are a little bit frustrated. They're complaining. So what happens is, when people hear that, they're sometimes they assume, well, maybe there's something wrong with the service. So there's a bias that we can't do more until we fix what we're already doing. The second bias is what I call the OEM bias. And that is that the OEM thinks, because of the OEM, that they have control over the aftermarket. They have control over the services. But that's a bias, because as many of us know, that in many of these market segments, OEMs face competition, not just from other OEMs, but from third-party maintenance companies, independent service organizations, and managed service providers. So that's a bias we have to overcome. The third bias is a product bias, and that is that the marketing team or the service management team attempts to go to market by trying to productize a service offering. They create programs like, if you have 9 service requests that you pay for on a time and materials basis, you get your 10th one free. So unfortunately, those kinds of product-based marketing strategies really aren't very effective in getting a customer to buy more services, because it just seems like it's what they already have. It's no different. I don't really know that I need a 10th service call. Or even buying, prepaid services is another way of looking at it. Then the fourth one is a pricing bias, that because people aren't buying, and when they're asked why they don't buy, the knee-jerk reaction, well, it costs too much. So to me, that's an issue of not being able to demonstrate the value of the service. So that's a pricing bias. And the last one is the technology bias, that we don't have the right tools and technologies to deliver on this. Now, that might be true to offer some offerings, to deliver some offerings or to market some offerings, but you also don't want to let the desire to be perfect to be the enemy of good enough. So you got to look at what can you actually do, what can you actually service, what can you actually create marketing programs around. So these are some biases, and I brought them up so you're aware of them. And I'm going to attempt to talk about how do you overcome these biases. So the first thing we need to know is that service is a matter of perception, and perception is everything. And we've heard that before, that perception is reality and vice versa. But I think it's a little bit different when it comes to services. We need to recognize that service is a matter of perception, but in a way, your customers are buying both the actual service. I'm getting up. Sorry, I don't know if everyone saw that. I just saw an error message pop up there. I had to close it. So you're buying. What the customer is doing is they're buying the actual service, and they're also buying the perception that the service will be there. So it's the actual service they're buying and the capability to serve. So the actual service is that field engineer. It's that spare part. It's that call center. But the capability to serve that they're buying and that you have to market and sell to them is that the service technician will get out there in 4 hours, that you can deliver a 99.9% uptime. That's the capability to serve, and that's the perception. The actual service is what happens after you deliver it. Another way to look at it is the capability or the perception of buying is the promise that you're offering them. And then the actual service is how do you deliver on that promise? And so that's got to be part of your marketing, to deal with both the capability that you've got, that you can do this, and then the actual results. And that comes from things like describing your infrastructure, defining your service portfolio and your offering, and really articulating it very well. It also has to do with including customer testimonials and references in your marketing approach. And so what happens is customers evaluate both when they purchase service. They're going to evaluate the capability. What are you offering? What are you promising them? And also, what can you actually do? So it's difficult, but not impossible to untangle the perception from reality. Most companies that are doing a good job at marketing services are good at untangling them and talking about the perception and the capability, not just the actual service. And I also want to state too about this perception, and it deals with one of the biases, is that there's a difference between a bad service offering and a poor service offering. Sometimes when the customers are saying they're unhappy, it's not because it's bad, it's just because it's not enough. It's not because it's, sure, let me rephrase that. What I meant to say, it's not because it's poor, that's because it's ineffective or they're not doing a good job. It's not enough, or it's not the right service. So what we've been striving to have our clients do when they want to develop new services and market new services is to conduct voice of the customer research, because that's the way to deal with these biases that stakeholders might have. And so one of the things that we like to look at is what are the gaps between the actual service received versus the preferred service level desired. That's the capability, that's the perception. And you want to evaluate the willingness for the customer to pay for this desired level of service. So what are they getting today? What do they really want, and how much are they willing to pay for it? And by the way, you also want to ask them how satisfied are with what they're getting. So this might be familiar to some of our participants from the UK. Mind the gap. You see that on the subway. Now, in this case, you want to stay away from the gap because it's dangerous. But when it comes to service planning and servitization, that gap is where the answers are. It's where the treasures are. So if there's a gap between the actual and the desired, there's an opportunity for you to develop new services, develop new programs, create new pricing. Now, the question is, well, what happens if people aren't satisfied with what they're getting today? Well, that's another gap. And you can fill that gap by either making investments to improve processes or systems, or finding partners that you could work with that can help you deliver these new services. And indeed, in a lot of the service offerings that I've seen, it's often delivered by a subcontractor or a partner, because not every manufacturer or service provider can do it all. They might need a subcontractor. So if one of your offerings involves a fast turnaround of spare parts, or depot repair and advanced exchange, sometimes you need a partner to do that. You need a logistics provider. So that's just an example. So we talked about dealing with internal perceptions. Now let's talk about dealing with the transition of being an order taker to service solutions. So it's pretty simple. You got to recognize that you don't have a captive market if you're a manufacturer. That's first and foremost. The second one is you have to educate your sales and marketing team on the size of the market, the growth, and the competition. They need to know what's at stake and why are they doing this and why are they going after it. Thirdly, you have to clearly define the value proposition. What's the problem the service is trying to decide, but also what's the value in use? And the way I look at value in use is what's the cost to the customer or the value of the customer in the absence of the service. And you, by knowing that, is a little bit more motivation for your marketing people and your salespeople to market and sell the offering, but also you could use that in your discussions with your customer and use that as leverage. Well, you're prepared to lose $2,000 an hour when your systems go down. That's kind of understand that. It also helps juxtapose the pricing, because if the customer knows that you know what it costs them, then the price you offer them may not be too extravagant when they realize what they could lose by not getting the service. And fourthly, you want to reinforce the solution with training and coaching on the value proposition, projection, and objection handling. So moving on here, we want to have the right sales methodology. The methodology needs to address customer pain points and problems with the status quo. It has to deal with value and use. It has to offer a solution to the customer. It has to view the sales as a relationship, not just as a transaction. So I think a lot of manufacturers have historically treated service sales and service marketing as a transaction, not as building a relationship. And you want to also develop and utilize marketing content and collateral throughout the customer journey. So now this gets into the topic of empowering teams to sell outcomes. So I was searching for a good picture to describe this. This is a picture of Cortez, a conquistador, who discovered Mexico and tried to conquer Mexico. And he wanted his fellow soldiers and sailors to succeed. And he was concerned that they maybe get reluctant. They may turn back. They may want to leave this new country that's new to them, that's foreign to them. It might be a little bizarre. So what did he do? He burned his ships. And I think that's what has to happen if you're really trying to build and grow your servitization business and offer new services. You got to burn your ships. You can't just dip your toe into the ocean. You got to go in full steam. And so the way you do that is you got to get very clear about the outcome. Make sure your team is clear about the outcome. You want to overcome or eliminate internal objections, misnomers, or biases that your team has about this service offering. Because if you don't, that's going to amplify in the market. And I want to just give you one brief example. Working with a client of mine, they came up with a servitized offering and as a service solution. Now, in this solution, there was a bit of a financing aspect to it. Now, the sales team was not used to doing that, offering that type of servitization solution. And they were a little bit concerned that people wouldn't buy it. So they had this bias, and that when they talked to the customer, they said, well, you can buy the product outright through a CapEx purchase, or we have this other solution that it's financing. But that's really wasn't what the company was offering. It really wasn't about financing. It was as a service. It was moving to an OpEx model. And as you would expect, nobody bought that when they talked about financing. So they changed the go-to-market approach. They educated their team as it's not about financing. In fact, we can provide as a service without financing at all. And that changed, and that helped them sell more services. And lastly, as I mentioned before, you want to move from a transactional selling model to a relationship-based marketing model. And what you want to do in that relationship-based model, first of all, you want to implement the right marketing stack. So you got to make sure you have the right service delivery infrastructure, because you can't sell what you don't know how to deliver or what you can't deliver. So you got to make sure your marketing aligns with your infrastructure. You got to have a CRM in place, obviously, about who your customers are, who your prospects are. You got to have marketing automation in place so you can continue to have a dialogue and conversations with your customers. In that marketing automation, you might want to look at having technology and tools that track when renewals are up, track, identify, and monitor how much your installed base is under contract. You also think it's important to have configure, price, and quote software capabilities in your software solutions. And lastly, you want to model service software as a service best practices. You want to model these types of solutions, because these companies, in my opinion, are really far advanced. They're doing some great work in using marketing to get people to buy more of their software and to buy more of their software. So as part of this, if you're a service marketer, you want to identify your buyer personas, you want to define the customer journey, and lastly, you want to map the marketing campaigns to personas and to their journey. And I got to state here that content is king. You got to have the right content to the right personas, right message. And if you do enough of it frequently enough, customers will listen, and it's only a matter of time before they buy. And then if they're happy, and if you continue to market to them in this way, they'll buy more. So I'm pleased again to have shared my knowledge with you. If you'd like to continue this dialogue, this discussion with me, here's my contact information. And also you could find me on LinkedIn at Bloomberg One. I'll turn it back to Ian now.
Many thanks, Michael. Some really interesting material there, and it stimulated some questions that I'll use in the Q&A session. Thomas, would like to hand over to you now, and if Christina can share the screen, we'll move you on to that next slide.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Michael. I think that was really useful for me anyway. So I'm sure that many of our attendees will also find that useful. Yep, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. Thanks for everybody for attending, and thanks again to Ian for inviting me today to speak. I'll be talking about our particular servitization journey and how we used servitization as a promotional tool. So my name is Thomas Fraser-Bacon. I'm the Marketing Director of All-C Technologies. I joined the company around 11 years ago. So All-C were established in 2007. Just to give a little bit of background, we manufacture commercial displays and digital signage solutions, initially starting with one range of screens. Now we offer over 40 different standard ranges in various sizes, as well as OEM bespoke products. Our product ranges include commercial advertising displays, digital menu boards, various high brightness window displays, outdoor screens, battery powered displays, touch screens, including self-ordering kiosks and point of sale screens, a host of direct view LED video wall solutions, e-ink electronic shelf labels. The list goes on. We also have a range of solutions specifically designed for corporate spaces as well. We offer more commercial display solutions than any other one single manufacturer, really. So we supply through a channel of trade partners, which include distributors, value-added resellers, and integrators. These can vary quite a lot in terms of what markets they're in and who they sell to, from IT and AV companies to traditional sign makers. Because of this diversity of our customers, we found the need to tailor our services to suit the needs of each partner and sometimes each project. Our journey hasn't been a typical one, but as I understand it, no two servitization journeys are the same. Obviously, there's an archetypal model for traditional servitization, for example, the Rolls-Royce case study, as well as many others. Obviously, there's a lot of other companies that I'm aware of that haven't necessarily taken the same approach to servitization. So, like I say, today I'm going to be kind of talking about our particular journey. So within our industry, results-driven services are challenging for manufacturers due to the nature of the product, but mainly due to the sales channel structure. So we sell, as you can see from the graphic on screen at the moment, we sell to distributors, resellers, and integrators. We don't sell to end users, obviously, as the manufacturer. The best opportunity for kind of traditional servitization kind of sits between the integrator and the end user. So that's just to kind of give a little bit of context, really. So now kind of focusing on our particular journey. So we were first contacted by Aston Business School and the Advanced Services Group in 2019, where we were invited to a servitization workshop. The initial interest really was to find, potential ways of expanding our service offering for competitive advantage, as well as obviously finding additional revenue streams. Soon into the first session that I attended, I realised that servitization was about much more than that. It was about kind of changing your mindset and reevaluating the way you view your products and services. The workshops that I attended forced us really to take a step back and take an objective view of the services that we were offering. After the case was made during the workshops for the potential of service-based growth for UK manufacture rather than product-based growth, it was clear how important offering advanced services would be for the next stage of our business and growth. The next step we took was to understand all of our partner and end user pain points. In some cases, they're related, but often very different. So, for example, end user pain point might be they want the reassurance of reliability from an extended warranty, for example. A partner pain point might be having the confidence to demonstrate or train our CMS software, or needing assistance from us to do that, both pre and post sales. So in some cases they are related, but in many cases they're different. So because we've got kind of those two target markets, if you like, those separate but related target markets, we kind of made two lists, if you like. Something else that was suggested in the workshops by the Advanced Services Group was to kind of take an internal survey within the company. This was really to understand the perspectives of team members at different levels in different departments. By doing this, we could understand customer, both again partner and end user pain points from different perspectives internally. It also allowed us to kind of reassess the monetization of our advanced services. That is to say that many of the services that we offer, not offered by our competitors, have been provided free of charge for over 10 years. So it helped us to kind of reassess, was that the right approach to take? Is it, should it be changed, for each kind of individual service? So from that, we kind of made a full inventory of all our current service offering, as well as any potential services that we could offer, obviously correlated with our partner and end user pain points that we'd identified. At this point, we made the realization that we had already started our servitization journey without even realizing it, or at least, offering multiple advanced services. From a number of other companies that I've spoken to, again, the workshops and other events that the Advanced Services Group host and put on are a great way to kind of, talk to other companies in most likely in completely separate industries, to kind of, I guess, compare notes. And again, as I mentioned at the start, no two journeys that I'm aware of are the same, really. But one thing that I found is many companies have kind of unknowingly started their servitization journey, like I say, without even realizing, before they start dealing with the Advanced Services Group, really. So then the next stage, we compiled a comprehensive service offering list, trying to focus mainly on our advanced services and others not offered by or promoted by our competitors. From this list, this comprehensive list, visual graphics and explanation copy were created by our marketing team. One consideration before we started our promotional activity was to identify any potential conflict with our sales channel. So, for example, if we were offering and promoting a value-added service that many of our partners were offering, but potentially their competitors not offering, we may be seen to be competing with our own resellers, which obviously we wanted to avoid. Ian and I actually had multiple value chain mapping sessions, the results of which you can see on screen at the moment. This helped us to identify and kind of categorize two separate types of partners that we have. It doesn't cover all of our partners and all of our customer types, but basically the two types that we've identified in this on-screen graphic here, value-added resellers or integrators, offering kind of end-to-end comprehensive services to their end users, and on the other side of things, kind of e-commerce resellers or box shifters, if you like. So following the value chain mapping sessions that I had with Ian, I had multiple consultation sessions internally with our commercial teams, and we basically concluded that the potential for growth to offer, to promote these advanced service offerings far outweighed any potential conflict. So we kind of pushed ahead. So moving on to the actual promotional activity that we undertook. So we created, from the graphics and the copy that I mentioned earlier, we created a page that was added to the end of every one of our product spec sheets. By doing this, every end user or partner doing any comparison with any other manufacturer's products, so for example, Samsung, LG, Philips, you know, household names that everybody knows, by having this clearly defined service offering list, it kind of gave us that distinct competitive advantage. Also, on our website, at the bottom of every one of our product pages, we had the same list, which obviously gave us the same competitive edge as the spec sheet, obviously just a different entry point for the customer. Obviously with spec sheets, that's usually kind of either during the tender process for a project, or, you know, at the early stages of just a general sales process. Whereas obviously the website's more, you know, an earlier stage, but it offered the same advantage. We also undertook an email marketing campaign to promote our full catalogue of services to all of our partners. And that really was to kind of help them identify how we could help them fill in the gaps for their offering to their customers. We also used it as a way of informing partners that we were adding this additional page to our spec sheets. I mean, one thing that I didn't kind of mention at the start is that Allseas Technologies, we're a kind of unbranded OEM. So none of our products are, you know, we're all kind of plain label. As such, all of our marketing material is unbranded. So the reason we wanted to kind of inform our customers was that, you know, some of the services that we were offering, maybe they didn't want to promote those services to their customers. So that just gave us an opportunity for that, really. There was no kind of recourse, really. No customers got in touch to say, you know, oh, we don't want you offering this particular service to our customers, etc. Something else that we did a service of the month campaign on social media. So over the course of 12 months, we kind of highlighted one of the services and kind of, you know, wrote a little bit about that. And that generated a lot of engagement with our partners. On LinkedIn alone, we had over 4,800 impressions for this campaign combined, you know, not counting our other social media channels. So that went down really well. We're also currently doing a video campaign as well. So we're doing one video every few months where a team member from the most relevant department picks a service or a number of services that we can offer and speaks about that for 30 to 60 seconds. These are primarily used on our social media platforms as well. The reaction and feedback from our partners from our promotional activity was extremely positive, many of which wanted to emulate the success that we had achieved themselves to their customers. So that helped us to kind of direct some of our partners and help them to understand some of the key principles of servitization that we'd learned, so that they could take a more kind of traditional approach with their customers. So for example, offering performance-based service level agreements, content management services, etc. Multiple partners actually reported that key projects had been won because of this distinction of service offering highlighted in our spec sheets. So yeah, it was extremely positive feedback. So following this first round of promotional work, a video interview was filmed with the Advanced Services Group. A promotional article was written and published a number of different sources within and without the industry. We also won Best UK Manufacturer Growing Through Services at the Servitization Awards 2020. All of these events inspired additional promotional activities, again, further strengthening our position within the industry as the only manufacturer within our market that offers a comprehensive catalogue of advanced services. So I suppose in conclusion, you know, this kind of objective reassessment and restructure, as well as the promotion of our full service offering, really prior to the pandemic, helped us to establish a unique position within the market. I think this groundwork was, and will continue to be, crucial to our kind of growth and recovery going forward as well. So that's it from me. I'm going to now pass on to Kawal. And again, any questions asked will be dealt with in the panel session at the end.
That's great. Much appreciated, Thomas. Thank you.
No problem, Ian.
Thank you, Thomas. Okay, hello everyone. My name is Kawal Kapoor. I'm from the Advanced Services Group, and looking at the time, I won't spend much time on the introduction, and let's get on with the presentation. Just checking if I have my yes, I have controls. Right, so I'm here today to speak to you about value networks. So basically introduce the idea of value networks to you, but also to take point that we've come together to look at things from the marketing angle today. So before we get into the details of value networks, let's look at all of this in a different way. Right, right. So the primary goal of a value network is to increase productivity. You're looking at how you can work with different stakeholders to generate higher profits for you as a business, let's say a focal business, right? Now, value networks will help you explore different relationships with different stakeholders. It'll help you design these relationships so you can actually create an estimate of how you'll be exchanging something of value, creating something of value between yourselves as the focal company and the different stakeholders, the different partners that you choose to collaborate with. And then we have this marketing channel. And here, your goal is to make sure that these products and services that you've created, that you produced, reach the buyers who are going to in turn generate orders for you, so you can again reach that level of profit or revenue that you've set for your business. And the common ground here is to make sure that the business in question is enjoying higher revenues, generating higher profits. But when you think of marketing, do you actually know to whom you're marketing? Who's your target audience? Or for that matter, do you identify with any of the questions that you're seeing on the screen right now? Do you know who these key stakeholders are? Who are those people internal to the organization and also outside your organization to whom you're talking to about marketing your services, about devising your marketing strategies? How do you market something, in this case, a service? How do you establish a credibility about a service in the minds of the customers who've only always historically seen you as reliable sellers of products? Do you know what your new stakeholder relationships are going to look like, so you can take these services successfully into the market? Or how these distributor and dealership relationships that you have while you function as a product business, how do these change with services? I would think, if not all, you perhaps relate with one or some of these questions. And if you do, then my next question is, have you really looked at the concept of value networks? Sorry, there we are. So have you really looked at the concept of value networks? Now, I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to start with the supply chain view. So with the supply chain view, we see markets as destination points, more sort of taking a linear view of the flow. But the argument that we all agree with is that the company should first think of the target market and then design the supply chain backwards from that point on. And this is where you move from supply chain planning to demand chain planning. And because you're looking at the market in terms of what solution your consumers are interested in and not product or service that you are trying to sell to them, you see a shift from the 4 Ps of marketing, where we we were so focused on price, product, promotion, and place, but now there is a shift towards what is the solution, where is the information available, what value is this adding, how do you access such solutions and information. And an even broader view is when you actually put the company at the center of a value network system. This system is of partnerships and alliances. It is one that allows a firm to create, to create the means to source some of the resources and competencies that they don't have, to build on those resources and competencies so they can deliver the offerings, the service offerings that they intend to do so now. And a value network will actually show you all these relationships. It'll show you who the suppliers of your firm are, who are the suppliers of your suppliers, who is the immediate customer, who is the end customer, and it will capture relationships like these, like what you have with an academic organization like ourselves. What relationship or what value do you derive from being associated with the university researchers, or maybe perhaps a government agency when it comes to different approvals and all sorts. The more you understand about value network, the more effective your strategic decisions for your business are going to be, the more focused your marketing message is going to be, because you would now know what is of value to whom, and then you can draft your marketing message around that understanding that you have gathered or developed. And value networks is a very comprehensive topic, and today we're merely scratching the surface to give you an idea of what value networks represent. So starting from the basics, then, what is a value network? All of the businesses, whether they realize this to be the case or not, are actually operating within value networks. And when we say value networks, we are talking about a combination, a set of stakeholders. It can be individuals, it can be organizations with whom you're constantly interacting so you can produce something of value. And when you look closely into such networks, when you get to analyzing such networks, you will see how value moves in your network, how it is being created, who does what, how is each stakeholder benefiting. You'll understand what their perception of value is in being associated with you. So what can you do to increase value for them? How do they add value for you? What are the different value pockets in your network? Where is the value dropping? Where is the value gap? Where is the loss? And all of these stakeholders that we're talking about, they're interdependent. They're working together so that they can accomplish a common goal for you. And more so, analyzing something as a value network gives you insights into what are your plus points, what are your minuses. So as an example, let's say there's a stakeholder A, and he has, or that stakeholder has a huge influence on your network. They're interacting with many other stakeholders. A lot of other stakeholders are dependent on them to produce something of value for your network. And if you end up losing the stakeholder A, it could have devastating effects for your entire network, because this stakeholder has created such high intrinsic value within your network that it's difficult for you to put a price tag on the relationship that you have with them, or with their participation in your network. And the value network analysis will pinpoint its stakeholders for you and let you know that you must do everything to ensure their continued participation in your network. And this is just one example. Value network does a lot more than just this. Now, let's look at developing a model of a value network. Think of it as an illustration of your valued business operation. So once you map these relationships, a value network will become a very structured representation. It will give you insights into who these different stakeholders are, what is the nature of their business. It will show you what they're responsible for in your network. So basically, it will define what their role is in your network. And when we speak about roles, the one thing you need to understand is roles endure over time, but different stakeholders can come in at different points and fulfill these roles for you. So the role is going to remain constant, and it is critical for you to accomplish something as the delivery of a service, let's say, if that's the goal of your value network. And if you're talking about servitization of a specific machine, and let's say one of the role dictates that you need a technology vendor. So today it could be Microsoft, but tomorrow for some reason, more feasible, more favorable for your business, you might change the vendor to be Microsoft. Now, in addition to identifying the role, value network is also capturing information about the skills, the resources, the competencies, the assets that are needed to fulfill that role. So when you decide to replace Microsoft with Intel or the other way around, you know what you have a list to to qualify them against and say, oh well, the vendor we are bringing in needs to be able to do this, 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 and this, and that's what the value network is helping you with. Now let's look at a quick example here. What you're seeing is actually a simple model of a value network for a company. Let's say it's Global Mowers Incorporation. I've highlighted it in yellow. The another yellow highlight is their service division, just to tell you that they belong to the same company. Now, remember, value networks can capture both internal and external stakeholders. So that's what you're seeing here. So what is the value network telling us? As you can see, it's very intuitive. The goal of this value network is to map out stakeholders that are working for Global Mowers Incorporation to achieve top quality turf at a golf course. So the golf course is the customer here. To keep it simple, I'm not showing you the full value network. It's very extensive. Just parts of it here to see what sort of information a value network can capture for you. So here it is telling me that the Global Mowers are responsible for manufacturing lawn mowers. They can do this because in terms of resources and competencies, they have the infrastructure, they have the expertise, and they're fitting these lawn mowers with sensors to be able to remotely monitor their operation to ensure maximum uptime at the customer site. So which is the golf course management company here. Like Michael mentioned earlier, a single business, a single manufacturer cannot do it all. You don't have all the expertise. So here in this case, the Global Mowers are actually collaborating with the hardware vendors and the software vendors, so they can get those. So as you can see here, the hardware vendor is actually bringing in the hardware sensors because they have the skills and expertise to develop them, which are fitted onto the lawnmower, but they can't capture the data that these sensors are generating. And for that reason, there is a software vendor in the value network who is actually got all that expertise and is capturing the sensor data and so on. You get the idea about what's happening here. So let's move on to the next slide then. Now, you can see that value network can be used for different purposes. Like I've just shown you, it can be used as a communication tool. I've just shown you how this can be used to easily communicate something of your working dynamics to the stakeholders. It readily supports a call to action. So I used a model to explain to you the workings of Global Mowers, and in a similar way, businesses can use value networks to communicate to both their internal and external stakeholders about how their workings are located in terms of generating value or collaborating with other organizations to deliver value. So maybe an executive actually wants to communicate to relevant partners that their new service offering is producing more or superior value in comparison to the older one. So they can produce comparative value networks to show what used to happen before and how things have changed now, so on and so forth. And at the same time, you can use it as a decision-making tool. Now, when I say as a decision-making tool, when you actually do a full-length analysis of a value network, it's capable of giving you some really in-depth information. Practitioners will be able to tell which stakeholders are creating most value, who carries most risk. You understand more about the corrective actions needed, so on and so forth. And you can also, in cases, identify some of the competitive threats that can inform strategy across different stages of your business operation. And as Thomas mentioned earlier, value networks will pinpoint conflicts, both internal and external. And if you identify some area of your operations where competitors are already doing something, then value networks have already highlighted for you right there and then that this is not the area where you can fetch any desirable results. Now, very quickly, just to give you an example. So I'm going to talk about a packaging company who were offering a range of services to their customers who who were already purchasing their product offerings. Now, they were doing this for free, and analyzing the value networks helped them assess some opportunities for value creation. They found that a majority of the services they were offering, which was as a part of goodwill and relationship building, were in a somewhat similar way being offered by their competitors, but not to that extent. So they found a way to package these services more attractively, build them into a service contract more robust than what the competitors were providing, and sold them for a fee. And here you can see that the packaging company converted value by turning something as service expertise, which was a free output, into a service contract, which is now generating financial gains for the business. The bottom line is how much benefit a value network can bring to a business really depends on how successfully that business is using these resources and insights of its partners to accomplish business goals. So it's basically to do with understanding business operation in terms of value creation, value exchange, value input, value output. So all things value. Very conscious about the time, so I am going to draw to a close and hand over to Ian now. But happy to take up any conversations with any of you offline.
Okay, thank you, Carol. That was some fantastic insight there into the value networks and the wider research. I'm just going to deal with some of the questions that have come through the panel. The first one we've got from Chris Raditz, and Chris has asked the panel, do they think that a manufacturer's brand might change during a service transition? So for a bit of clarity, is the service brand an extension of the product brand, or does the overall brand become service-based? Michael, perhaps you could pick up on that one to start.
Yeah, I think it depends on the company and their objectives. In some cases, the company brand is an extension of the services. Like take, for example, GE Medical Systems. But you have others where the service is just so separate from the product. It might even be driving aspects of the business that you want to have a separate service brand for it. An example comes to mind is IBM, IBM Global Services. When that came out, there was also IBM, the product company. So they had to create a separate brand for services.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you, Michael. I've got one here for Thomas, which is perhaps more SME related. And Volkmar has asked Thomas, in your experience, how willing is an SME business to make the shift from a product supplier to a value supplier? And
Okay.
Up to you.
Sorry. Yeah. So I think echo Michael's sentiments. Really, I think it depends on the type of business it is, the industry that you're in. So some of our partners who have kind of been very eager to kind of adopt a more service-driven approach, that definitely can be considered SMEs. I suppose most of those would be relatively new. Definitely less than 10 years old. And I suppose that they're trying to still get a foothold or trying to gain that competitive advantage. I think for some larger companies, it might be a bit trickier, as Michael mentioned, if you're already, if your offering is very product driven and that's already well established as part of your brand, then it's obviously more difficult. But I think for SMEs specifically, it should be, the transition should be a lot easier in theory anyway, for our industry at least.
Okay, and perhaps if I can add a supplementary onto that, Thomas, who do you think are the stakeholders that are having the most difficulty with the mindset change within companies?
Good question. I think, again, I think it would depend. I'm just trying to think of a few examples, but I think it depends on the company size and how long they've been established and who their end users are, who their customers are, etc. I think a lot of Michael's presentation was very interesting in the sense, that the bias and the internal internal resistance, I suppose. I think that, again, that comes with more well-established, larger brands. I think applying it just to SMEs, especially SMEs less than 10 years old, I can't foresee, I can't imagine, a huge level of internal resistance, because again, at least at least consider the approach. My advice to any SMEs, from our, based on our experience is, and I'm not just saying this, but really get in touch with the Advanced Services Group, attend the workshops, and try and understand the mindset, because we personally weren't able to take a traditional servitization approach, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't gain something from it. It's really been revolutionary for us internally, not just myself and the marketing team, but the sales team, and all the way down to the logistics team. That change in mindset has really changed the way that we approach everything, and changed our direction, I would say, in the long term.
That's really good to hear, Thomas. A question for you, Carol, if I may. How would you suggest a firm started when they were considering a value network model? Is there a particular point that you would say, start here and then work from here, or is it more complex than that?
Do you mean when to apply the value network model? So it is more to do with, this is a very versatile model. So it is more to do with, yes, if you are at the early stages, let's say you're at the design stage or the development stage of the service, you use the value network model to create a more predictive scenario where you want to see which stakeholder mix create perhaps 2 or 3 different value networks with different stakeholder mixes to see which one would fetch you more value, and then you take that direction. But let's say you're into the service delivery stage already, then you want to be able to assess how much value the stakeholder mix is creating. Perhaps problem areas will be identified where then how to, who your problem creators are, and probably bring in substitutions, replace them with more value-adding stakeholders. So you can do it before, you can do it during, you can do it after, just to periodically come back to your stakeholders and keep assessing as to how much value they're producing. Also, to the previous question, I can add to what Thomas was saying, because some of the data that we collected with our partners. So one of the things that really popped out was this fee versus free dilemma that these companies face when, the mindset challenge especially popped out with one of the companies saying that when they were working with their sales team, the sales team wanted to offer these services for free. So, they could generate more revenue with their products, but the service team was dedicated to bringing revenue into the company by the sale of services. So there was a lot of internal conflict, and it took a while to get where they are today. But these are some of the mindset challenges that we see within these partner companies.
Okay. Well, you've actually hit on a question that I had asked Michael to perhaps pick up on, about this challenge between the sales and marketing teams giving away products and services for free to sell the products. Michael, is there anything you could perhaps add to that as we close?
Sure. Yeah. And it's a great question. So let's look at some of the reasons why a company might want to insist on giving away services for free. And there's a couple besides the one that Kyle mentioned, is they want to make a deal. But also it could be the customer is unhappy. So the salespeople think, well, if we give them some service, they'll become happier. A third one is the sales team isn't able to articulate the value of the service. Or fourthly, they can't justify the pricing. So let's say they're looking for a deal. If a company has made the decision to monetize services, they have to burn their ships. So they have to the salespeople have to find another way to add value to create that deal. And maybe you have to create transfer pricing, that the sales team gives away the service, they're going to get a hit for that from the service department. If they're unhappy, customers unhappy, again, there's other ways you can incentivize a customer and make them feel happy. Maybe you give them a discount. Maybe you give them an extra month of service. You're not giving it away for free entirely. They are still paying, but they're getting a little bit of a bump or a reward. If you can't articulate the value or can't justify the pricing, well, then you have some marketing work you need to do. You need to really dig a little deeper, do your research, and fine tune your message.
That's fantastic, Michael. And let me just bring the session to a close, if I may. I'm just mindful we've run just a couple of minutes over, but in part because of the quality of the questions coming to us. Just a reminder that we have Servitization Live happening in October this year, the 4th to the 6th. It is an in-person event in Birmingham in the UK, but there will be live streaming of the event. In fact, if you look at the slide now, you'll see servitizationlive.com for all the details. It will be a mix of industrial speakers and exhibitors. Would love you to come along and find out what we do and what companies. Thomas is a great example of what All-C Technology are doing and can do with their new mindset around servitization. We have plenty of materials available on our advancedservicesgroup.co.uk website for anyone interested in starting their own servitization journey. And really, I'd just like to thank the speakers, Carol, Michael, Thomas, for their time today and for such insight into the role of marketing and how that can support servitization. And if there's any of the delegates that we've got online today have an interesting story that they think they would be happy to share, please contact us at the Advanced Services Group and we'll do what we can to put you on a platform. So again, thanks for taking time to join us. It's been great to see so many people here on a Wednesday afternoon or a Wednesday morning, depending on where you are, Michael. But thank you again, and advancedservicesgroup.co.uk, that's where you'll find us. Thank you.
Thank you.